Hello, welcome back to episode 6. Another week, another episode of CBT. I'm here with Rod and Ethan, and for once again, coming on the podcast for episode number 6. I can't believe we've made it this far. I wouldn't have guessed we made this many episodes, but here we are. So we've got
Got
a
a whole
lot to
10
talk
viewers.
about today. Yeah, I want to first off, I want to thank the 11 subscribers. I love you all.
How many subscribers do we have now? We gotta
11.
thank them.
11.
have
We have
11.
exactly
Yeah,
11.
11.
That's crazy. I was just throwing a number out. That's
All right,
crazy.
now
Thank you.
we have a lot to talk about tonight, so I want to get straight into it. Obviously, we're recording this on June 30th, a few hours after free agency has begun. And the big story of the day is Kevin Durant requesting a trade out of Brooklyn. Seismic is the only word that comes to mind to describe it. I mean, a player of his caliber requesting a shift of teams is going to be, it's changing the entire power dynamic in the NBA. So, Rod, Ethan, do either of you have any thoughts that you want to just get off your chest right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, like I said last episode, I did not think Kevin Durant had the mental stamina or the energy to go through this process again. But clearly I was wrong because he does not mind moving on to his fourth team. This is just, it's monumental. Whatever team gets Kevin Durant is instantly a contender. If he can make the Brooklyn Nets a contender, then no one's safe from wherever he goes. I feel bad for Nets fans, really. They tried so hard to make them happy. They listened to KD. They made him involved in every move, and still he signed the extension. He said he would stay, and just like that, he does another team dirty.
I would like to say that I'm not surprised. I mean, but this is also like, we've seen this in superstars recently where they sign like an extension and then
They
just
request a trade.
Never
right
before the extension kicks in, though.
Yeah. So I will say, and I will keep saying what I said in the previous podcast, I would like to see him go to the Timberwolves. Like, genuinely, just as a basketball fan, I would like to see him on the Timberwolves. Now, that won't happen whatsoever because they don't have the assets to trade for him.
Exactly.
But I'm just saying, like, as a basketball fan, like Kevin Durant, along with Ant and Cat, ooh.
Yeah, the word that's spreading around town is that this is going to take the largest trade haul ever to land him on your team because it has so many. He's got 4 years left on his contract still, and while he still has obviously this value on the trade market, he's one of the 3 best players in the world, if not better than that. I mean, Kevin Durant's 34 years old, and he's got frail bones. I question how well his game is going to age. Sure, he's great, so I'm sure he'll age just fine, probably drop a few points per game, but I question his durability, a guy who's seen injuries, especially in the past few seasons. So if I'm a team, I'm not sure I want to give up my entire future for Kevin Durant. If, I mean, it's just not a sure thing by any means, but there is one team that I would like to see give up their future for Kevin Durant, a team that has the assets to pull it off, a team who has someone who should be a superstar if he was playing, and that is the New Orleans Pelicans. They have a treasure trove of young players and draft assets. I think if you make Brandon Ingram the jewel of the trade and, throw in other guys, the word is the Nets want 2 all-stars, though. So, I mean,
They're not
getting that anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't give that up if I'm New Orleans, but Ingram and give some of the young guys like Herb Jones, Alvarado, Jackson Hayes, throw him in the deal, and maybe you get Kevin Durant to come to New Orleans. And the idea of Kevin Durant and Zion Williamson playing together on the floor, I mean, that's obviously exciting. I think it'd be must-see TV, and it would catapult the Pelicans right into the conversation of best teams in the Western Conference.
I think that's a good one. I haven't heard the Pelicans yet, but I think, like you said, I don't really see a world in where the Nets get what they're looking for. Obviously, publicly, they're going to say they want 2 all-stars. They're going to say they want 5 first-round picks, but I'm not really so sure what the market for KD. Obviously, all the 30 teams in the league would love to have Kevin Durant. But when it comes time to actually move 3 to 4 starters, 3 to 4 first round picks to get him, I don't know how many teams are going to look at Kevin Durant and say, well, he has 4 years left on his deal, but clearly if he's not liking the situation, he'll just request another trade and leave. So when I looked around the league earlier, just in my free time, I didn't really see that many teams that have the assets to get Durant in the first place, but also would still be able to put together a championship caliber team once KD gets there. The two teams that I think have the most potential, I think the most obvious one and the one that's been talked about the most is the Suns, because Ayton is basically, he has 1 foot out the door already. A package around, Ayton, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and some picks. I think that's a pretty solid offer. The Nets should look at that. And the other one would be the Heat. Obviously, Tyler Hero. I guess you'd have to include Bam. But even then, I don't really know how a core of Lowry, KD, Jimmy, and Oladipo would fare, in deep playoff runs. So it's going to be super interesting to see the package that ends up snagging Durant, because I don't think it's going to be what any of us are currently expecting.
Actually, I saw earlier that I think just contract-wise or something, Bam Adebayo would not be able to go to Brooklyn unless Ben Simmons is moved elsewhere, is what I've heard. I'm not sure what the reason is, but I've seen that. Players with big contracts can't be included in this trade because of Ben Simmons.
Okay.
But so they'd have to add a third team if they wanted Bam to go there. But I don't think either of those two teams you mentioned have enough assets to pull this off. Sure, those are KD's number 1 and number 2 preferred destinations. And I find it funny that he requested to be on the 2 number 1 seeds of last year.
Well, that's
Or
KD.
it just happened to be his 2 top targets. But I don't think either of them have the assets. You mentioned DeAndre Ayton would be the major selling piece in the Phoenix team. But Brooklyn, they did just extend Nick Claxton today. So it questions do you want to be paying Nick Claxton to sit on your bench? It wasn't a big contract, but I don't know if you do. And it has been said that they want Devin Booker in the trade if KD goes to Phoenix. And that's just not going to happen. They just signed Devin Booker to a big extension today. I don't think Phoenix is sure, it could happen. You never know what they're going to throw at him. I don't think it's super likely. And I think Miami is even less likely.
Honestly, I don't know a team that's willing to give up as much as the Nets really want for Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
Because don't get me wrong, Kevin Durant is, superstar. Top 2, arguably, whoever you want to put up there, best player in the league at the moment. It's really weird how the Nets want to approach this. I don't know how the Nets want to if they want to rebuild and go
exactly.
OKC.
They re-signed Patty
route.
Mills, Bruce Brown. I don't really understand.
Because they're
I don't understand their plan.
So they can do a rebuild mode basically, and hey, OKC.
Hey, that would be fun to see. I mean,
they can dish out 12 first rounders.
Cupcake, yeah. Or
yeah.
You can go a different route, which I don't want to put it out there, or maybe we're getting a little bit too early with it. But if they want a star, a player like JB, or maybe, or even I've actually thought about it. The Bulls, if they really wanted to, could give up either DeRozan or LaVine.
The Bulls are interesting.
Well, they'd have to re-sign LaVine first.
Yeah. Or they could do
sign and trade.
Sign and trade type of thing. And LaVine would basically get the keys to Nets. So that's one thing that I've kind of when I was looking at teams of what they have, I think the Bulls would be an interesting place to look at because he could finally play off ball with an actual point guard that facilitates.
I haven't heard the Bulls yet either.
Lonzo. Yeah, so that's just
I have heard the Bulls, and I think the package I saw was DeMar, Vooch, Patrick Williams, and 4 firsts or something ridiculous.
I haven't I was just looking at teams around the league
Yeah.
because there's not that many teams that have enough to offer.
That's what I'm saying. There's only like 6 or 7 teams that would want
Mhm.
KD in the first, like non-rebuilding teams that could
I
actually
don't think the
put together
Pelicans
a
would be a
package.
place that KD goes to just because of like what went down with AD and
But
like
KD doesn't
ownership
have a
and
choice at the end of the day. Brooklyn,
Ah,
no, he doesn't have a no trade clause. He has no power in this situation. It comes down to if Sean Marks wants to respect his wishes or not. But he said at the end of the day, he's taking the best deal that's offered to him. So I don't think it really matters where it is, as long as they're a contender, and KD can make anyone a contender.
oh,
And
obviously.
to talk about, you said Jaylen Brown, right? So the Celtics would obviously have to give up a ton for KD, as would any team. Trading Jaylen Brown, I don't know, you might have to throw in Rob Williams,
No,
like Grant
Oh,
Williams,
no.
and then like 4 firsts or
they
something.
could take Grant and whoever else
It'd
they
have to
want.
be
That would
KD
be
and Rob.
incredibly moronic for the Celtics to do, because let me tell you something this team has that it's kind of hard to find in the NBA. This team has chemistry. And if you have chemistry, you're not going to trade that away, even if you're getting one of the best players in the world, because as we saw with Brooklyn, sometimes they just don't work. And on it scares me how Kevin Durant and Jason Tatum would play together in a Celtics uniform. That's a lot of dribble, 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 as Charles Barkley likes to say. So I think it would be very dumb for the Celtics to trade away their entire future, everything that they built up to this point over the past 5 years, 6 years of Eastern Conference Finals, pain. It would just be stupid for them to trade that all away for Kevin Durant, a 34-year-old Kevin Durant, no less.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the other thing that's happened because of KD's requested trade, and that is Kyrie. Kyrie will, there is not a doubt in my mind that Kyrie, Martin Luther Irving, will not play another game in a Brooklyn uniform. He will get traded, but the problem is, A, he's got 1 year left on his contract, and B, no one really wants the guy. So I think the only destination is the Lakers. That's the only one I've heard, because no one else is really willing to get a crazy guy on their team.
I mean, once he opted in to that player option, the market was slim pickings. But once he opted in, there's really no team besides the Lakers. And it would be, do the Nets want a $50 million Russell Westbrook? Hell no. Nobody does. He's the only person in the league with less value than Kyrie right now. So I told you earlier, and we kind of had an argument about this, that I think Kyrie has to open his mind to the possibility of just playing this year with the Nets, because who wants him? Nope. If nobody trades for Kyrie, then he's going to play for the Nets, or he could just sit out, which he probably, that's probably the most likely
more
option,
likely. Yeah.
to be honest. But I do not really see a world, even if the Lakers are by far the most interested team, the Nets have to accept the offer. And like I was saying earlier with the KD trade, they're going to have to settle. This is not a situation like when Anthony Davis requested a trade, or when the Thunder traded Paul George. There are not a list of teams lining up and willing to give up their whole future to get Kyrie. And maybe even KD. We don't know about the package for KD yet, but I really don't think Kyrie, if he gets traded, how much the Nets are going to get in return for him.
Just, I don't know. Thinking about the Lakers trade package, I mean, realistically, what are we looking at? Russell Westbrook,
THT.
THT, and that first round pick.
Yeah.
Yep.
Basically, that's what you're thinking of. Now, for the Lakers, that makes sense.
Oh,
obviously,
that's an amazing trade. Wonderful trade.
But I think people are forgetting the fact that there's another man in Nets town just chilling there.
I forgot Ben Simmons existed for like a month. I'm not even
A
gonna lie.
man named Ben Simmons. And imagine Ben Simmons and Russell Westbrook playing together.
I'd cry, and I'm not a Nets fan.
Imagine them two playing together. That would literally be just awful.
It would be a 1960s offense.
It would be terrible. Like, imagine the defenses. You're making their lives easier.
They can have
They can
3 people sitting in the paint.
Yep. Literally can run a 2-3, just pack the paint. Like it's crazy. So I just don't see it. I don't see any type of trade forming. Now, I don't like also at the same time, what team could use a Kyrie? Because I think Kyrie's like the asking price for Kyrie is definitely lower than KD.
I'm surprised the Knicks aren't
Significantly.
interested. I'm surprised the
Mhm.
Knicks don't want to make a move
Well,
here.
the Knicks just got their pick
Yeah,
guard
they
of the
just
future
yeah.
But even
with
still, I'm
Jalen
like,
Brunson.
I know they wanted Jalen, but we can talk about that right after this too. But I know they wanted Jalen Brunson bad, but for as flashy as the Knicks are and as desperate as they are just for raw talent, I'm surprised they were not more interested for Kyrie. And they tried to get Kyrie when he left the Celtics too.
Mhm.
So I don't know. That shocked me. But do we want to talk about now? My
No,
boy, the Bull.
No. Let's talk about the
no.
Dejounte Murray trade
Oh,
first.
my other
No,
So,
I want to
guy.
say one more thing
oh,
about the Lakers before we continue.
Oh, not the Lakers.
please no.
One thing that I think should be like considered for the Lakers front office is a man named Anthony Davis. I get it, he's young and all that,
Doing what with Anthony
but
Davis?
I mean, if you have the chance to move on from this injury-prone man,
I trade AD for KD.
yeah, that's what I was gonna get at. I'm like, I don't know. For the Lakers, it makes sense to basically package Anthony Davis in a like whatever you can, basically. But centered it with Anthony Davis because he's just too injury prone and not reliable. And I don't know. I don't want to say I've seen a decline,
Oh, I have.
but
Yeah, what do you mean? He fell off a
yeah,
cliff.
I don't, yeah, basically. Yes.
I league executives apparently had been saying that it's a possibility that Kyrie and KD both get traded to LA.
No.
They seem to think that package can get put
I
together,
mean,
which would be absolutely insane, first of all.
that
But
would be the biggest trade ever as far as
I
raw
don't
money
see
and all stars and
I
stuff.
don't see any real way that gets done without adding a third or a fourth team. It would just be so many moving pieces to figure
Yeah.
out, and making the
Definitely.
money line up. Just that would
4
be
Hall of
near
Famers in one move.
impossible. Exactly. So let's move on to another trade that wasn't that hard to figure out, and that's Dejounte Murray to Atlanta in return for Danilo Gallinari, who is no longer even a Spur, and 3 first rounders and 1 pick swap, 2 of which are far in the future and unprotected, which are gold mines for teams asset wise, because obviously we have no idea how good the Hawks are going to be in 2027 and 2029, I think, are the years those picks are. So, Rod, I know you were not a fan of this trade by the Spurs. What are you thinking?
We got into an over 1 hour long argument
It was pushing 2.
while I was on my road trip home about this trade as soon as it went down. My stance is that this is one of the worst trades I have ever seen from the Spurs perspective, and you are of the opinion that you understand the move and you don't think it was that bad, correct?
I think the Hawks won the trade, but it wasn't that bad for San Antonio.
Let me explain my point of view, why I think not only the Hawks won this trade by a mile, but why I think this is going to set the Spurs back by many years. Let's start with the Hawks. Obviously, they've been looking for a guard to play in the backcourt with Trey to try and cover up his defensive flaws. For a long time, we heard Ben Simmons to the Hawks when the Sixers were looking to move him. Not only do I think Dejounte is better than Ben Simmons, he's a much better fit with the Hawks as a guy who, size wise, he's really more of a 2. He's what, like 6'5, a little over 200 pounds, or around 200
He's
pounds.
got good length as well.
Yeah, so defensively, I mean, he can really guard 1 through 3, probably even 1 through 4, depending on if a team's put like a Cam Johnson or Jay Crowder at the 4. So defensively, we know what he is. He just led the league in steals. He's all defense. And offensively, he just broke out for the Spurs, as we all know. 20-point scorer, all-star, led the league in triple doubles, I believe, last season. So he's a proven commodity, in my opinion. I don't think the fit will be seamless. I think they will go through some growing pains, but this immediately makes the Hawks better. They made the conference finals 2 years ago. They had a down year because basically everybody outside of Trae Young had a down year. But I think this move sets them on the right path. Covering Trae's defensive liabilities should be the Hawks' main objective. And they didn't even have to give up John Collins, so they can still move him for another valuable piece. Now on the Spurs side, I was utterly baffled because the Spurs, who were a rebuilding team, just traded their best player by a mile, their 26-year-old point guard, to further themselves into a rebuild. I could not fathom. When you're a team like the Spurs or the Thunder with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the goal of being this bad and getting high draft picks is to get guys on your team like Dejounte Murray, who have shown to be young, promising all-stars. I think Dejounte is the 7th or 8th best point guard in the league, and he's 26, and this was his first year as the Spurs' best player. So I think he had such room to grow and expand his game on the Spurs, and to move him and not even get a guy like John Collins, who isn't all that good in my opinion, but at least it'd be a guy who might average 20 points on the Spurs, to not even, they got no players in return. That Gallinari was cut in one day. They got no players from this move. All they got are unprotected picks and pick swaps, which could still be, none of which could be lottery picks. That is a very real possibility that none of the picks they got from the Hawks will be lottery picks. If the Hawks re-sign Trae long-term, the Hawks will not be picking in the lottery. So the Spurs are hoping, like you said earlier when we were talking about this, to tank. And do you want to talk about who they're looking for
I do want to
in
talk
the draft?
But first, I want to talk about why I understand it for the Spurs, at least in my eyes, why I can see what they did it. So Dejounte Murray is going to be 26 years old by the time the season starts. I get that. But in my eyes, he's not a top 20 player in the NBA. I don't think he's good enough to be the best player on a championship team, and I don't think he ever will be. That's just how I see it. I think he's going to take a step back this year in Atlanta and will not have a year like he did this year in San Antonio. So if I'm the Spurs, I'm not that upset about giving up Dejounte Murray. And this is why. 26 years old, as I mentioned, the Spurs were not winning a championship in the next 5 years if they continued down this current path. Dejounte Murray would not fit their timeline. They need to get younger and just more potential to build more for the future. Don't look short term, excuse me, oh my goodness. Short term, look long term. And that's exactly what they did by getting these draft picks down the road. They could either draft with them, use them as assets, whatever. But when there is a prospect on the board in the next year, like Victor Wembanyama from France, you have to do everything in your power to get this man. He's 7'2" and has a wingspan of 7 feet and 9 inches. What I've heard him be compared to is Kevin Durant on offense and Rudy Gobert on defense. In my eyes, this guy is the real deal. San Antonio will not win more than 25 games next year, so they'll have at least a 25% chance of getting that first overall pick. And even if they don't, they can get Scoot Henderson at number 2, who I think will be better than Dejounte Murray. So if I'm San Antonio, I'm fine with the assets I got in this trade, whether I got a player that I can use or not.
Okay, I want to say this, and then Ethan, I want you to give your opinion on which side you think makes more sense. So you said that Dejounte doesn't fit their timeline, that they had no chance to win a championship in the next 5 years. We have no idea about that. Most teams that pop off and end up making a fairy tale run, 3 to 4 years before they do, they were horrible. Nobody talked about them. They were irrelevant. The way you build a championship team and a team that contends every year is weathering the storm of these 29, 30 win seasons, acquiring talent and building a roster. The Spurs were never going to get a Kevin Durant, a LeBron James. The Spurs are never going to have a super team. The Spurs, like they did with their last dynasty, have to draft well, make the right trades, and sign the right players in free agency. They had $30 million in cap space before they made this move. They could have signed a litany of players that could have propelled them at the least into the play-in next season. I'm not saying they would have even made the playoffs, but I'm saying when you're a bad team, you have to take the proper steps. What if the Kings next year won 39 games and made the play-in? We'd all be clapping it up saying, "Oh, good job, Kings. You did something." That's not if the Celtics won 39 games and made the play-in, we'd be like, "Oh, what the hell?" There's levels. You have to go through the rough points and build something. If the Spurs would have signed, let's say they don't get a guy for 30 million. Let's say they get 2 role players for 15 mil apiece and they win 40 games next year and they lose in the first round. Then the next year they develop their players. Dejounte gets better. Keldon Johnson gets better. And then they win 45 games, make the second round. There is now a path for them to get better, develop their talent. And as long as you're in the playoffs, the Hawks made the conference finals 2 years ago. Nobody thought about that. There's always teams that go on runs that people do not expect. There was a route there for the Spurs with Dejounte Murray. You say, well, he didn't fit their timeline. I think Dejounte Murray will be an all-star caliber player for the next 6 to 7 years. If you don't think they could have built a team that could win 45 to 50 games in the next 6 to 7 years, I just think you're wrong. So that's why I'm saying there was no need to hit the reset button when you have a guy like Dejounte that I think you could have built around and won a lot of games. That's my opinion. Ethan, you've listened to this for 2 days now. Where are you feeling on this?
I just want to make my own comments before I don't know. Just my thing with the Spurs is I think they did have to hit the reset button to a certain extent, because if you really think about it, when they had oh my gosh, what's his name? DeRozan? Sorry. I forgot about that. But when they had DeRozan, like, weren't they in the playoffs one year?
Yeah, they were in the playoffs, then they lost in the play-in.
Yeah.
They were stuck in
But
mediocrity.
yeah, they were basically stuck in limbo and they needed another piece. And there's been a lot of free agents when DeRozan was there, yet nobody wanted to go to the Spurs. I think that the Spurs is not a destination that people want to go to. And I'm not saying that's a hate on them. I mean, that you said that they got who? LaMarcus Aldridge that one?
Yeah,
Like when
they got LaMarcus 1 year.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, there's not a lot of free agents lining up to go to, the Spurs. So I think that's why they were realizing like they should get rid of DeJounte at this point. Even though I don't think it was the smartest idea, I guess starting a rebuild would make sense for them, moving past the Greg Popovich era. But I also don't think that they're trying to set up for Victor.
Whoa.
I don't know. Let me read you a stat line, okay? I'm gonna read you 2 stat lines.
Please do.
And tell me which player you'd rather have. Okay? Would you rather have a player that averaged 14 points per game? This is just draft prospects. 14 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3.6 assists, right? Solid player. It's not too bad. Or would you rather have a player that averages 9.4 points per game?
9.4 points. I want that guy.
5.1 rebounds, which is about the same, and then 0.8 assists.
What does he shoot from the field, Ethan, as a 7-footer?
7'2".
Oh, from the 3, ooh, a whopping 0.26, so 26%. That's crazy. So for you to say it's offensively like Kevin Durant, I think you're disrespecting him.
That is a little disrespectful to Victor.
Yes.
I apologize.
No. I just think, and I've seen the highlights.
Oh,
I don't.
And you're not convinced?
I'm
not. That's not what I said. That's what I've heard.
Yes.
That was a quote from an NBA executive.
Well, that NBA
better have been the Spurs executives.
Yeah, it may have been down low because I don't know. I mean, And I guess we can't really tell who's going to be the number one pick until we see them in college.
No,
for the most
Victor
part.
is going to be the number one pick. I would guarantee that. Put $1,000 down on that, no matter who's
Scoot
drafting.
Henderson.
Yeah, that's the other name I said.
Yep. That is the projected number 2 overall pick. Has
Mm-hmm.
better stats than Victor does. And he plays in the G League and Victor plays in the Euro League. Is it Euro League or French League?
The Euro League is a much more talented league than the G League.
Disagree respectfully.
That's a topic for another day.
Yeah, so I just don't think that the Spurs are trying to line up for Victor. I just don't know what the Spurs could have been thinking besides just rebuild. Like they're genuinely trying to just start a rebuild past the Greg Popovich era. That's just my opinion. I don't think either of you are exactly right. I think both of you have good points and bad points.
I've got a stat line for you guys. If you're an NBA executive, are you drafting a guy? You wanted to talk about Victor Wembanyama's stats this year. Are you drafting a guy who in the Euro League averaged 13 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and shot 46% from the field and 28% from 3? Would you draft that guy?
Oh yeah, he's much better than 9 and 5.
Much better? I don't know. It's not that much of a difference. Do you know who averaged those statistics?
Oh, Luka
Doncic averaged those statistics in the Euro League. And I think Victor Wembanyama is the best prospect since Luka Doncic, if not farther back. And you're not drafting him off of what he is right now. You are drafting him off of potential. And I don't know how you guys don't see it, because me and every other person in the world cannot get enough of this kid, because he is going to be the next big thing in the NBA. A 7'9" wingspan, that is absurd. Like his defensive upside and offensive upside, his ceiling is limitless.
I think that's fair to say. You know, I'm not a draft expert. I'm not here to say who they should draft, who the best prospect is. This is the last point I want to make, then we can move on. I just think any GM, any team in the NBA could blow up their current roster and tell their owners, well, we're going to be bad for a couple years, but you know, if we draft right in 3 to 4 years, maybe we can compete again. That's the easy way out. Any GM could do that. It's a lot harder to take what you have, what you've already done, and build a team to try and compete. That's why a lot of GMs get fired. That's why a lot of teams hit the rebuild button prematurely. I just think when you got a guy like Dejounte, there's a lane. There's a route for you to take to build and try and compete. And you got Greg Popovich, who can elevate a roster. I thought there was a way for the Spurs to win long term, and I think they gave up. That's why I don't like this trade. They gave up and are hoping for the future.
So if you had the number 1 pick next year, we'll say come May, you win the draft lottery, you're sitting with the number 1 pick. You have Victor Wembanyama just sitting in your hands. You have the future of the league ready to come to your franchise. Would you trade that for Dejounte Murray, Rod?
If I was the Spurs, I would rather have not had that pick at all and kept Dejounte.
Because yesterday you said you would trade that number 1 pick for Dejounte Murray straight up.
Well, I think Dejounte is going to be better than any player in this draft. That's my opinion.
I think that is going to be so far from incorrect, but only time will tell. We will see. Let's move into another topic. So in today's episode, I wore my Charlotte Hornets t-shirt to honor woman respecter Miles Bridges, who just fumbled the bag, maybe worse than anyone I have ever seen. He was going to get a max deal probably today from someone and gets charged for domestic violence in LA. I think the bond is like $130K. So he messed up pretty bad. It's felony domestic violence. We're not talking about a misdemeanor here. Do you guys think he's still in the league next year? I mean, is this career-ending stuff?
I don't think it's career-ending. Well, he sent a woman to the hospital. That's not very good.
Not a good look.
You know, it's different. There's levels to this. If Ish Smith sent the woman to the hospital, he'd be out the league. But it is a guy who is going to get a max extension. He averaged 20 points per game last year. He's young. So obviously, I think there's really no way he doesn't get jail time for this. So that's definitely going to happen. But I mean, we just saw a guy in Malik Beasley serve jail time and play for the Timberwolves last season. So I'd maybe he doesn't play next season. Maybe he does take a year off, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, spend some nice time in the justice system. But I do think he will return, and a team will most definitely give him a shot. This is not the end for Miles Bridges, but it's a horrible situation for the Hornets. They just lost their second best player for absolutely nothing. And I think the Pistons were in the running to get him. That would have been a nice addition for them. So hurts a couple teams.
I think after this, he actually fits in with Detroit even better.
Yeah.
I would expect him to go to the Pistons. But let's talk about Jalen Brunson now, someone who's actually not fumbling the bag and maybe got a bag that, in my opinion, was a little too large for him. Rod, you have been on the Jalen Brunson train for a while now. I'll let you go ahead.
I don't even know where it started, my obsession with the man named Jalen Brunson. It's been at least 2 years now, back when he wasn't even a starter. I just saw him come off the Mavs bench and light it up. I'm like, this guy, one day, this guy, he's going to be something. We just saw a heroic performance in the playoffs. One of the main factors the Mavs got to the conference finals. I'd say arguably the main reason, definitely the main reason they beat the Jazz in the first round with Luka missing time. He was absolutely unstoppable in that series. I think the Knicks, I think they made the right decision. The Knicks are notorious for handing out horrible deals, horrible overpays for guys who they think will save the franchise, i.e. Julius Randle, i.e. Joakim Noah, i.e. the list could go on.
It's endless.
But I think this is different because what the Knicks they needed a point guard. I said earlier I thought they would get Kyrie, but I think Jalen Brunson, he's not a floor general, but I don't think he can't be a floor general because obviously when Luka has the ball as much as he does, everybody else kind of has to be off-ball shooters and scorers. But I think Jalen Brunson and RJ Barrett is instantly the best backcourt the Knicks have had, and I don't even know how long. They still have Julius Randle, maybe not willingly, but they have him. I think this is a good move for them. Now, what was it? 104 million was the official number.
Which was a little lower than it thought.
26 mil a year for Jalen Brunson. Obviously, he's not worth 25 plus million a year, but if he is a 20-point scorer for the Knicks and they end up making the playoffs next year, I think nobody will criticize this move. When you're desperate for somebody, you pay what you have to pay. And I think the Knicks got their guy in Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, go ahead, Ethan.
What was that Mike Conley? Was it Mike Conley's contract?
That was awful.
Yeah.
That was god awful. I think it was 30 mil a year.
I'm not saying it's going to turn into that, but I think it's going to be close to that. I think Jalen Brunson after 2 years, I mean, don't get me wrong, Brunson's good. But I think knowing the Knicks, 2 years,
that's fair. Yeah,
probably the third year going into it, they're going to try and trade him. It's just like how it
even
goes.
If he's good.
Yeah, I think they're going to end up trying to trade him. So it's going to be kind of a situation where with Mike Conley, where a contender is going to try and trade for him just to help them out. I think that's what it's going to end up turning into. And his contract is going to be like that in like 2 years, maybe. So I'm not worried about Brunson. Do you want to talk about Brunson or can I segue?
I actually have.
Yeah,
Rod used the word desperate when he was talking about the Knicks and this contract. And I think that's where this contract came from, was desperation. The Knicks have such high expectations and such high pressure on them playing in MSG that they have to make the playoffs every year or else the fans will riot. Because I think if they miss the playoffs more, the fans will literally burn down Madison Square Garden. So this is an effort just to make the make the playoffs. Sorry, I have COVID. This is an effort to just make the playoffs. But this isn't gonna win them a championship. Jalen Brunson not that guy. So sure, the Knicks are doing well if they want to be a first round exit, but this doesn't change much for them. They're going to be a play-in team probably get first rounded. So it was just a desperation move. Get something exciting, something positive in New York for that franchise, because the other franchise has nothing positive going for them.
In
So
flames right now.
At least the
It's
city of
just-
New York has Jalen Brunson, whether they overpaid for him or not.
And Julius Randle. Don't forget about
No,
Julius.
we don't
They
talk
don't
about
want- they don't
Julius
want
Randle.
Let's talk about another man. A man that was paid. A man that you, Mr. JJ, wanted.
Oh,
A
Tyus
man
Jones,
named
my dream
Tyus.
free agent.
Speaking of overpaid people,
Oh, stop it.
Tyus
Ethan,
Jones.
you don't know anything about Tyus Jones. I
Stop
want
it.
you to stop. I said the number would be 15 million a year. That was spot on exactly.
You hit
what he
it,
got.
yeah.
I hit the
I was
nail on
saying
the head with that
12.5,
one.
but you said 15. Yeah,
But
that's
this is
fair.
what really got me going. When Tyus Jones was signed, I immediately was sad because he was my dream free agent. Would have changed the Celtics offense for the better entirely. Ethan started celebrating.
No, I wasn't celebrating. I was not celebrating.
Why were you
By the
laughing?
way, I saw it because you thought he was coming. You wanted him to come to the Celtics.
Why would you not? You
That's
want
what I'm
Kyle Kuzma,
saying.
but not the all-time record holder
Ethan
for assist to
hates to see
turnover
the
ratio.
Celtics succeed, and he's a
I-
Celtics fan.
No
Hey,
sense.
I have been in hell for the past 5 years watching the
Oh, and we're gonna
Celtics
stay
do
there
what
because
they-
we didn't sign Tyus Jones.
Don't talk to me about wanting not to to not want them to succeed. Do not say that.
Oh.
But
This
I think the
Raptors
contract
fan
was
over here,
deserved.
this lowly, poor, no good,
Whoa!
filthy Raptors fan
Whoa!
got a championship before these
Rod is
Celtics.
catching strays.
We got a chip over the Celtics. And
That's what I'm saying.
I'm so happy.
But I think Tyus Jones would have definitely been a step towards a chip for the Celtics. Now a step that we no longer have. The Celtics, in fact, haven't done a single thing in free agency. Have
A
yet to
single
sign
thing.
literally anyone. They offered Gallinari
Are we
the
surprised
mid-level
though?
exception.
Are we surprised?
He's likely to go to the Bulls. That's enough of Tyus Jones. I don't want to be crying on this podcast, so let's move on. Let's talk about Nikola Jokic. He got quite the big deal. 5 years, 264 million. Was that the number?
Yep.
It was 260
Probably.
something million.
I think
Obviously,
53
well
and a
deserved.
half.
Back-to-back
Yeah.
MVP.
No,
There's
yeah.
not much to talk about here.
We could talk about the Nuggets in general next year, getting Jamal Murray back, Michael Porter Jr. back. They definitely exceeded my
They'll be
expectations.
a nice 4 seed.
They exceeded
Yeah.
my expectations last year for not having those guys, but I think they're getting a little overrated. I think they're going to have basically 3 new starters with Jamal, KCP, and Michael Porter next year. So Jokic is not the same player Jamal Murray remembers. He's gotten much better. So it's going to be interesting to see how that fits in. But I do think the Nuggets are still going to be a
Yeah.
very good team in the West.
The Nuggets
Good
are in a good
seed.
position,
Yeah.
even though the West is as strong as it is. Another player who got paid today is Bradley Beal, who did re-sign in Washington, which was a little bit surprising. And honestly, it's kind of sad because Bradley Beal is going to go his
Deserves better.
entire career without being on a relevant team. I mean, they haven't won a playoff series in Washington since 2017. And I get you don't want to turn down $50 million a year. I know I certainly would. But I would be willing to get paid $35-40 million if it meant I was relevant and playing in May and June, which is not something that Bradley Beal will be doing anytime soon.
I think, there are some players like, Damian Lillard, who they're more cultural icons. They're remembered for their amazing solo performances more than for actually winning. Nobody talks about how Allen Iverson chose to stay in Philly when they didn't put great teams around him. They just talked about how good he was as a scorer and how much they loved him and he was their favorite player. Bradley Beal does not care about winning a championship. Clearly he enjoys DC, and 50 million a year could keep anybody in Maryland. So good for him.
Oh, District of Columbia.
Another signing that happened today, PJ Tucker to the Sixers. PJ Tucker is a guy who loves contenders, just like Kevin Durant.
He gets
Any
passed
thoughts
around.
on that?
This is very
None.
good. This is a very good move for the Sixers. One thing, this is a 3-year deal. I do not know how I feel about paying a 39-year-old PJ Tucker $11 million.
I wouldn't do it.
I would be surprised if he averages more than 3 points a game by the time.
Philly also signed Daniel House, so now we have James Harden, PJ Tucker, and Daniel House all in Philadelphia. So
they did trade for Anthony Melton on draft night as well. They've made a lot of moves.
Yeah, so we're having a little bit of a 2018 Rockets reunion in Philadelphia. Whether it works, it is yet to be seen. Are there any other signings that either of you two would like to talk about?
Signings, well, we can talk about the player option that was accepted, and then the move made by John Wall to secure the bag and then dip from the Rockets to join the Clippers and make them, in my opinion, the favorites to win the finals next year.
Yeah, obviously a good pickup for the Clippers, but John Wall, I mean, he's played like 40 games in the past 4 years, I think is the number. We don't know how good he's going to be. I'm sure he'll be fine, but until I see it, I won't be convinced. That's why I'm not saying the Clippers are the favorites. I think it still has to be the Warriors. They just won. They've got the chemistry, but
what about Reggie? What's going to happen to Reggie now?
Oh, Reggie is so horrible, Ethan. You don't even understand.
Reggie,
the Clippers have been one of my favorite teams in the league.
When I turn on the Clippers games and I just see Reggie drive in and blow a layup, I know.
Reggie does not shoot 40% from the field. Anybody, honestly, is an upgrade from Reggie Jackson. I do not think he's a top 30 point guard in the NBA. But the Clippers, I just love the Clippers. They got Norm. They got Kawhi. John Wall is one of my favorite players. I just love the Clippers.
Yeah, I do hope the Clippers have some success with this team because they have never had any. Literally, they've made one Western Conference final. But any closing thoughts from either of you two?
No, not really.
I don't think we've talked about it enough. But the Celtics have to do something soon, man, because I can't keep doing this. All these teams.
Flashbacks of Danny Ainge doing absolutely nothing.
I thought coming into this offseason after we had just made the finals, I was thinking, okay, Brad is going to pull the trigger. First day, 6 o'clock hits, Woj blowing up my phone with all this stuff. And what am I missing? Something from the Celtics. Yep.
Nothing.
And
I expect something will happen by the time this podcast goes out. Knock on wood.
No.
I don't think so either, man. I'm sorry.
Maybe Gallinari. Please, Gallinari.
Well, actually, I read a thing that the Celtics are only offering him a 1-year deal. It's like 6.5.
6.5. I think it's the mid-level.
And then the Bulls are offering him a 2-year, $15 million.
The Bulls are currently the favorites to sign Gallinari, so it's unlikely he even becomes a Celtic, which is sad. But I guess we'll run it back and probably be a second-round exit next year. I want to thank you guys
until the Celtics trade for Kuz. Yeah.
First-round exit
solves nothing. Whoa, when they don't trade for Kuzma, I'm gonna start laughing uncontrollably, Ethan.
Nope.
So thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. I ask that you please hit like, subscribe, comment. Where do you think Kevin Durant's getting traded to? Do you think they have enough assets? Who do you think won the Dejounte Murray trade? Are the Spurs idiots? Why is Victor Wembanyama going to be a top 10 player all time? Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Ron and Ethan, for coming on the podcast. We will see you guys in a week. Hopefully when the Celtics have done something in free agency. We'll see you guys later.